We're back, Real Talk Twin Cities. I'm Eric Pirius with Bell Mortgage along with Cheryl Kempenick, Coldwell Banker Burnett. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, Eric.
And we're here with Dave from Kingsbury Law Offices. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Eric. Cheryl.
Welcome to our new slot, 4 o'clock on Saturdays. We're all very excited about that. David Kingsbury of Kingsbury Law Offices is here with us as promised. Bankruptcy Law Office MN.com. Since 1990, he has been helping people resolve their debt problems. Personally filed over 7,500 bankruptcy cases. That's quite a bit, Dave. You've been doing this a while.
It is, long time, yeah.
All right, all right.
Where are your offices located?
Apple Valley.
Okay, so that's a convenient part of town, not too far from where we are. So one question I have for you, I always think about Christmas and people racking up all of their credit card debt,
Oh, yeah.
but that's not really your busiest time of year, right after the holidays.
Well, this time of year, people are focusing on spending money. And not really interested in looking at their bill situation. It's after the holidays when the bills start coming in, and it's kind of cyclical through the years, but through the year, over the calendar month to month. But there's dog days in the summer. Around the holidays, it's always kind of slow. Tax refund time gets pretty busy because then people have got the finances available to file a bankruptcy case, and I think the creditors, collection agents, kind of ramp up that time of year. To tell you the truth. So we see a lot more activity, it seems like. Yeah.
Boy, I never thought about that the collection agencies would be thinking about possible tax refunds.
Yeah, because they're tapping into bank accounts, and if they're going to levy an account, and they might get lucky, sure. Yeah.
So it's a big decision for someone to have to do this, and they can get a hold of you at your website, I imagine, at bankruptcylawofficemn.com, or give you a call at, what's your number, Dave?
952-432-4388.
And you consult with folks to decide if it's a good idea
Certainly
or
do.
not. Okay.
Yeah.
And how do they know when it's time to file bankruptcy, whether it's personal or business? What are some of the markers? What are the...
Oh, gosh. Well, if you can't meet your basic expenses for food, shelter, transportation, typically people are pushed into it. Like I said before, it's not a laughing matter. It's kind of a big deal.
Right,
Most of us are
right.
conditioned, pay your bills, and bankruptcy is a bad thing. But it's a useful tool. You really shouldn't hesitate to use it when the time is right. And it's kind of hard to say when the time is right. It's relative to your situation. Mm-hmm. Some debt at a certain level for one person is really nothing to somebody else. Typically people are, I always say, pushed into my office. Usually it's some kind of an event, garnishments coming down, bank levies, they're getting a lawsuit, kind of personal cataclysms like injury, job loss, divorce, those types of things will push people into a bankruptcy situation.
And some of those judgments and tax levies, they're tapping right into your payroll check.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Coming out before you ever receive the money.
Yeah, if they're making it hard for you to live, then you should really start thinking about doing something, is what it really boils down to.
And so what's the process? What does somebody have to go through in order to file bankruptcy?
Well, they need to talk to a qualified bankruptcy attorney, first of all. There's probably the best legal advice that I could give somebody. I don't charge a dime for it. Don't take legal advice off of street corners, or even off the internet, because there's a lot of bad information out there, misinformation that really leads people down the wrong path. People will sometimes do things that they think is a good idea, and they'll get to me and I'll say, I really wish you wouldn't have done that, because it's got some pretty severe consequences for a bankruptcy case for you. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these things you can't, there's no mulligans allowed. You can't take them back. It's real important to talk to somebody as far as getting a good sense of how it works, and more specifically how it's going to apply to me. I do consults, and I have people fill out some paperwork for me before they come in so we can go through it together. It's fairly exhaustive. I'm very detail-oriented and very thorough. It's a little bit like peeling an onion. There's lots of layers to how all this works. So I want as much information as I can get to do a good case analysis for somebody. So it's your basic budget. What kind of assets do you have? And then some basic information about your financial affairs, where you live, where you work, what kind of transfers have you had, have you run businesses, what's the nature of them, have you paid back debts to family members, all kinds of different things really work into
Well,
it.
it sounds like it's really important that they work with a bankruptcy attorney, somebody who specializes in this.
Well, there's a lot of people out there that have filed bankruptcy that have got all kinds of advice for their friends and relatives, but years ago I used to say their bankruptcy case is a lot like a snowflake. From a ways away they all look the same, but you're really looking at them up close. They're all different. So, your case is going to be different from your Uncle Bob's or your sister's or your parents or whoever.
Yep.
So
You'll be able to reach out to Dave on our website at realtalktwincities.com or his bankruptcy law office mn.com. So once you've collected all that information, a few months later, you file your, is it a petition, a bankruptcy petition?
It's a
with the court?
bankruptcy petition,
Okay.
right? Fairly detailed document. They usually run between 50, 60, 70 pages long, kind of dependent. Over the years, they've added more and more forms to it. But the idea is I do the consult to do a good, thorough bankruptcy analysis, and then it's a teaching opportunity as well, so I can tell them how it works, how it's going to apply to them, give them their options, and at that point, I'm just a point of information. I'm not there to sell anything to anybody. I want them to get a good sense of how bankruptcy works and how it's going to work for them, and then they have to weigh the consequences of doing bankruptcy to determine if it's for them. And some folks, I tell them it's not a good idea. I don't want your case. Even if you really want me to file a case for you, because it's just going to turn out badly. You're not going to be happy with the result.
Like buying or selling a home, that could impact that, which we'll talk about in the next segment.
It can, sure.
Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 are a little different in that respect. What is the difference between a Chapter 7 and a Chapter 13?
Well, the basic difference is a Chapter 7 is kind of short and sweet. You can get in and out of it in 90 to 100 days typically once it's filed. There's one hearing about 30 days into it, and then there's a 60-day period that runs where creditors or other parties in interest could object, which they usually don't, but it's a statutory time period that has to pass. Typically when that's done, the court issues an order for discharge.
And all of your debts are discharged?
Those that are dischargeable, which are things like medical bills, credit card debts, unsecured lines of credit, some taxes, those kinds of things. Chapter 13 is a reorganization of your debt, runs anywhere from a minimum of 3 years to a 5-year period, depending on what your income level is compared to the median income once you go into it. And you're reorganizing your debt. And so you're making a payment to a Chapter 13 trustee, and you may be paying back all the debt, you may be paying back very little of the debt. And so the analysis on what the payment's going to be is going to be different for everybody. And so they're individually tailored to your circumstances. What do you have to work with? What does the plan have to do? What are your expenses? And what do you got left over to make that payment? And is that adequate to do what you need to do?
So Chapter 7, wipe the slate clean.
Yep.
And Chapter 13, you'll have some sort of payment plan.
Yeah,
typically.
Yeah. The default answer for me is usually do the Chapter 7 if you can.
Okay.
There's more than a handful, I guess 5, 6, 7, 8 reasons why a Chapter 13 makes a lot of sense. Some debt you can't take care of in a Chapter 7, but you can in a Chapter 13. You may be precluded from doing a Chapter 7 because of assets, income, those types of things, or maybe you've done something, as I kind of alluded to before, transfers or something like that, that would really cause a problem in a Chapter 7. Then it's time to look at what kind of benefit you could get out of a Chapter 13, and they work really well for people too.
You mentioned assets, home, for example, retirement assets, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
What do you get to keep, or is your home at risk in a bankruptcy? Is your 401k at risk?
401ks are specifically excluded from the bankruptcy estate from a case back in like 1990, 91. It's called Shoemade versus Patterson. It was a Supreme Court case. So those aren't a problem. Other kinds of pension assets are exempt to over $1 million typically.
Okay.
Your home, depending on which set of exemption statutes we use, either the federal or the state, you're not going to have a problem typically unless you've got a super colossal amount of equity in your house.
So the one thing that is important for our listeners is that they reach out to you before they start using up their 401k or refinancing their home or dwindling some of the assets that they might be allowed to keep.
It's really a tragedy when somebody comes in and they've done everything they could to keep the creditor's at bay and they've exhausted those assets that they're going to need for themselves in retirement or for their family later on, just because they're so desperate to try and avoid the bankruptcy or what have you, when you could have protected those assets, because they're going to need them.
Right. And so what does it typically cost to file bankruptcy?
That's one of the first questions I usually get when somebody calls my office, and it's the most difficult one to answer because it's based on your circumstances. And so the way I will usually answer that is what's a ballpark for a plain Jane Chapter 7 case, if that's what you're asking about, which is mom and pop mortgage or two, car loan or two, some credit card debt, maybe some medical bills, those types of things. You're usually looking, including fees for filing fees, mandatory credit counseling courses, credit report that we pull, those kinds of things, usually somewhere between $2,000 to $2,500, and somewhere in between, usually.
And it sounds like that would really be worth it, especially if somebody is having garnishments taking out of their wages.
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
they could easily be hitting $2,000 to $2,500 pretty quickly. So you also do debt negotiations. How does
Right.
that work?
Well, usually it's a situation where there's a creditor or two that's really causing somebody a problem. Other than that one or two creditor, those clients that hire me to do that kind of work can manage their other debt issues, but they've got somebody really pushing them. And so if they're not interested per se in filing a bankruptcy necessarily, we can look at a debt negotiation. And it's a situation where you have to go into it with reasonable expectations, make a good offer. You have to be able to write a check, between 30 and 50% I usually will consider a good offer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds like you've got a lot to offer, Dave. You can reach out to Dave at bankruptcylawofficemn.com or get a hold of him at realtalktwincities.com. He's one of our trusted partners here at Real Talk Twin Cities. We're coming up next with Contract for Deed, after foreclosure,